recorded so I can download it and post it.
Sure.
Really complicated. Okay. Take a quick break here and then we will get started.
Okay.
Ready to go, Adam?
I'm ready when you are.
Hi, and welcome to the Small State Podcast. My name is Beth Feldner. I'm from Minot, North Dakota, but I'm actually broadcasting out of the Minneapolis airport in a cute little wine bar on a layover. And I'm joined by my co-host, Rachel Pishtek.
Hi, I'm Rachel Pishtek. Hi, I'm Rachel Pishtek, and I am in Fargo in my apartment. Not as exciting.
I wish I was in your apartment too. And we have a really exciting guest today, recommended by my husband, Clay Feldner, but a guest I was hoping we'd have on without his recommendation even. We have Adam Twardowski. Hey, Adam.
Well, hey, how are you two doing?
Well.
Good.
Good.
Awesome.
I'm joining you from Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
Exciting. You're actually our second guest we've had from Washington, D.C.
Third.
Oh, third. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I love your very national reach already. That's impressive.
Yeah. We've got both coasts then. That's for sure.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I haven't thought of it that way.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we're so happy to have you here, Adam. And I know I told you just a little bit about what the podcast is about and kind of threw you in here, but we're here to talk about your connections to North Dakota, which I know you haven't always been proud to brag about. But
not at all. Clay exaggerates that completely. No.
But we can go ahead and get right away started and just go into the first question we have, which is, where are you from?
Sure. Well, originally I was born in Missouri. But I don't remember very much from those years. My parents both of them are from Poland, and it's a long, complicated story how they ended up in Missouri. Essentially, my grandfather accidentally immigrated to America. And you wonder, how do you accidentally immigrate to America? Here's how you do it. He found himself in 1981 in Missouri, at a time when Poland was still communist and the government clamped down, imposed martial law, and he found himself stuck at a medical conference in Missouri. Borders were closed. He couldn't go back. So basically, the telegram my family sent back to him was stay. And then later, my grandmother followed. Later, my parents followed. And they found themselves in Missouri. But when my father finished medical school in Missouri, he then took the family and found a job in North Dakota, and we went there, and I spent most of my childhood in Bismarck because of that.
Awesome. And that's how you know Clay. And we're very good friends with you. You played violin at our wedding. Blessed to know you. But growing up in Bismarck, can you tell us a little bit about where you went to school?
Absolutely, yeah. I went to school. See, I did most of my elementary school at Centennial. Started at Pioneer. I went to middle school at Horizon, which is where I met Clay. We met in orchestra together. It's interesting because if it weren't for orchestra, I don't think our social groups would have crossed ever. So that's how I met him. And I went to high school at Century, where I graduated in 2009. And I was just reflecting on the other day, it was 8 years ago almost. So it's been a whirlwind since then. Yeah.
Wonderful. Orchestra is, I know I love my B schools, but orchestra is something I really wish I'd had the opportunity to take part in.
No, I have to tell you, I've always was impressed with I still play violin to this day, and really the bulk of my violin musical education was in Bismarck. Bismarck had really, really good public school orchestras all throughout. I started in elementary school at Centennial, did it at Horizon and at Century, and it was such an important part of what I did, and I was so impressed with how well they did it. Yeah.
So obviously you're mentioning orchestra. What other activities did you participate in elementary school, high school, whatever? Like what activities?
Well, I can barely remember the elementary and middle school days.
Well, fair.
But,
fair. Me either.
The other big thing I did in high school that I really enjoyed and took a lot of time was newspaper. I was on the Century Star for a couple of years, and it was a great way to explore kind of journalism. I had a really good journalism teacher, Sue Skaliski, and I had an opportunity to write stories about very diverse topics, everything from I wrote this big story about students' connections to World War II through their families.
Oh, wow.
I did about teachers whose children were having medical crises, and so I kind of ran around the place and did a lot of interviews with people. I think I did stories about school administration stuff, and that was something else that took a lot of my time.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I did well, but it was the only time I've ever done something like that. So I remember that very fondly. Big things I did in high school: music and newspaper.
Yeah, that's amazing. So those both sound like you think of those fondly. Would you categorize your high school experience to be pretty positive then?
Yeah, actually, it's interesting. I think this is probably a common experience for a lot, and pretty much anyone, is that, when you're going through high school, you kind of just do it day in and day out. And in hindsight, looking back on it, I had wonderful teachers whose influence on me I didn't really appreciate until much later. For example, my AP government teacher, Sharon Espelent, who I don't think I would be doing what I'm doing today if it weren't for her. And I had incredible English teachers, Bev Junt and Gail Bedoin at Century, who were very tolerant of all my weird quirks and who tolerated my weird ideas and encouraged me. I had Perry Lee, probably the best history teacher I've ever had in my life. To say nothing of my Latin teacher, Linda Brandt, who was just this, not only great teacher, she was just a really good human being. And thinking back on those years, I really appreciate now more than ever. It was a really good place to go to high school. And although at the time I probably just, life was crazy and I didn't appreciate it, but now I do.
Yeah, I feel like that experience is echoed a lot from various people that I've heard from and known from Century. So they've always talked very highly of the educators there. So that's a really interesting thing to hear. But kind of getting in a different direction than high school, we have a few silly questions mixed in as well. Then you mentioned you live in DC. So when you are back home in North Dakota, what is your favorite place that isn't Applebee's or another chain restaurant that you go to get a meal?
Right. I don't go to North Dakota very often anymore because my mom lives in Minneapolis. But the last time I went to Bismarck was for Bess and Clay's wedding in September already.
So
and
fun.
Since I hadn't been in Bismarck in a while, I was so impressed. I couldn't even recognize there were so many restaurants there that were definitely not there when I was around. And there's one I was really impressed with, in particular, this new one downtown called. It's not Toasted Frog. The name is escaping my mind right now, but it was this, and maybe you'll help and remind me. It was all these like different small serving plates. It's I think it's Humpback Sally's is what it was called.
Yes.
I think.
Yep.
I never imagined that I would see a restaurant like that in Bismarck, and it really was impressed with it. I was really impressed with this new coffee shop just down the street, Terra Nomad. I was completely blown away because that's something I had grown accustomed to seeing, in Minneapolis see, but I just loved it. It was so unique. The vibe there was really cool. And I was really loved to see just the food scene, the cafe scene in Bismarck just has taken off since I've left. And I loved it. I was really impressed.
Such a good job with their downtown in Bismarck. They've really grown it.
Tremendous. It's so important for a city just to have I always felt, growing up in Bismarck, I never felt it had like a core, like and for the first time visiting Bismarck last year in a while, I felt, wow, there's really a core growing, and I was just completely blown out of the water. It was just amazing. Really impressed.
Okay, great. So before we go on to the next question, does anybody have their phone on? I was hearing a dinging. Is that you, Adam?
I don't think so. Well, I don't think so. I didn't hear anything.
Okay, if you didn't hear anything,
weird.
Yep, don't worry about it then. It'll be just fine. I was just going to check.
Yeah.
Okay.
And don't worry, I cut this all out of it, so it's fine.
Great.
Okay, so we'll get started again with the next question. Do you want to go ahead and reach?
I've already asked like the last three. If you want to go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I can do this one too. Okay, so now that we've kind of talked about your favorite local restaurants, and Bismarck really has grown in such a fun way. Another question that we ask a lot of our guests, because this is North Dakota, and we are very tied to our North Dakotan food. What is your favorite hot dish? Do you have a favorite hot dish?
I have to be honest with you. Pretty much just anything with tater tots. Do all hot dishes have tater tots?
No, but that's a good staple of most. I feel like that's definitely a genre of hot dish or category.
I can't at this moment remember. I haven't had a hot dish in a long time. The one thing I did like, though, I had a friend, Eric, who would take me to Trinity Lutheran Church in Bismarck to like lutefisk dinners. So that's the main thing I remember from Bismarck, cuisine-wise, was those lutefisk hot, like potlucks. I don't know.
Dinners. Yeah, that's a great answer, honestly.
That hasn't been brought up yet.
Yeah, I don't remember anything about hot dishes, but I do remember going regularly to Trinity for those lutefisk dinners, and it was very weird. The concept is very unique, but that is definitely something I enjoy telling people about when they ask food from North Dakota. The first thing I say is lutefisk. Look it up.
So is lutefisk something that you enjoy eating, or did you eat the meatballs at the lutefisk dinner?
That's a good question. I probably started out with just the meatballs, but over time, I think like with many acquired tastes, I grew to appreciate how unique it was. So
wow.
Yes.
You're probably the only person under 80 years old that I've ever heard say that, to be completely honest.
Well, you know what? Once I had a friend who told me that a friend in law school told me I have a 90-year-old in a 50-year-old's body. So that makes sense. I would like lutefisk. Yes.
Okay.
That's totally accurate, and that's probably why you're such good friends with my husband, because he is like
that's so true.
Clay is in his own way a very old man too. So
he is. Yep. He eats lutefisk and he will drink aquavit.
Wow.
Yep. So
goodness.
You guys are definitely meant to be friends. That's for sure. What a great answer to that question. We haven't had anybody bring up lutefisk or tater tots in hot dishes.
I'm proud of myself. And you thought I wasn't proud of my North Dakota roots.
You're bringing out all of these unique things.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so we've kind of reminisced about your time in high school and in Bismarck, but can you talk us through a little bit about what happened after you graduated high school?
Yeah. So after I graduated, I decided to go to Concordia in Moorhead, which is where I did my undergrad. I majored there in political science and Chinese and minored in history.
Wow. Really? Sorry, sorry to cut you off, but I graduated from Concordia with a degree in political science, and I also took Chinese from Ming Lao.
Where did you go? I don't know.
Yeah, well, we wouldn't have overlapped. I graduated from Concordia in 2015 and started in 2011, but that's really interesting.
Yeah, no, we overlapped. I graduated in 2013, so
Oh, yeah, we would have. I was thinking you said you graduated from college in 2009. Yeah, so we did overlap, but just barely. We wouldn't have had any classes together.
that's a small world. But yeah, I went
Yeah.
to Concordia. It was a very another very formative, important time in my life because I had no idea what I was doing, what I wanted to do. But during that time, a couple important things happened that Concordia made possible. And the most important one was that I spent semester, about 6 months total, living overseas in China. And it was coming back, I realized, I really needed to take my life in a different direction. And so Concordia was when I really began to realize that I wanted to incorporate international issues and Asia broadly. But at Concordia, I played in the orchestra. Also, I was involved in that was actually the main thing. I did a lot of music, even though I was not a major. I ended up spending probably more time in the music department than any other place. But the key thing about Concordia was that I just had a lot of great experiences. It was during that time that my family moved to Minnesota. That really kind of, I decided, because I didn't know what I wanted to do after college, I went to law school. So I went to the University of Minnesota, and I thought I was going to be this like big firm lawyer. I had this kind of vague idea in my head of, okay, well, I want to just, make a lot of money and work in a big firm. And so I was on that track. I even did very well my first year, but I had a summer job in, DC my first summer that and I remember this because Beth, you and Clay visited me in 2014 here in DC.
We did, yep.
And I kind of had experiences that made me realize I was going to not practice law. And basically what happened was I went back to Minnesota after my first summer in DC, but I had this plan that I was going to finish law school in DC. So I spent next year in DC, but then I did my final third year in DC at Georgetown. And I did that because I wanted to start gaining experience in kind of the international relations sphere. I did this fellowship at the State Department, and I started working at a few think tanks. And most importantly, while finishing law school, I made plans to start another degree kind of jointly with the law degree, which was at the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown. And so I started doing that, and that's what I'm doing right now. I also had been working at this think tank in DC that focuses on defense and security issues, and I've had published in some different outlets and write some reports on defense topics. And where the future takes me, that will depend in large measure on the political winds. But I've met a lot of very interesting people in here in DC, and where the future takes me will that's an interesting question to reflect on. But I think I'm here in DC for the long haul, and that's the rest is history.
That's really awesome. You answered a few different of our questions. So now kind of to go, I know that your work is very serious, and the political climate has greatly affected it. But let's move to something a little bit more fun in my brain anyway. So I know you have a very intense, that's not the right word either, strong, I guess, connection to Poland. And I know that also you've traveled a lot, and I'm envious of how much you've traveled, and I was really hoping that you could expound a little bit on, why you're so connected to Poland. We'd heard a little bit about your family and stuff, but why you're so connected to Poland, and some other travels that you've taken.
Sure. There are three main travels in my life that stand out. So first of all, in Poland, like I said earlier, my family sort of just wound up in Poland, or in the United States, somewhat by accident 30 years ago. They really weren't intending to move here. It sort of just happened. And it's hard sometimes to explain to people how you can accidentally immigrate to a country. But if you know anything about the history of, Eastern Europe during that time and the kind of reality of the political climate there, it makes sense that weird things happen. So to this day, even though my grandparents lived in the United States for over 30 years, a few years ago, in my grandfather's retirement, they decided to go back and live more full-time there, despite being loyal and devoted Americans. And so I go quite often because it's my only occasion to see them. My grandparents live in this city called Krakow, which is in the south. It's a beautiful medieval city. It used to be for centuries the capital of Poland before it was moved to Warsaw. And they live right on the Vistula River next to this castle, Wawel. Clay will remember because I went with him and another friend, Thomas, almost 10 years ago. We spent 2 very interesting weeks traveling around, especially southern Poland together. And I go really just to reconnect with, like you said, very deep and actually, I would say, intense connection is appropriate. It's a part of the world I'm very interested in. A very famous historian, wrote a book about Poland's history, and he called the book God's Playground. And if you know about the kind of very convoluted history of Central Europe, you kind of know that Poland is perched in a very geographically inconvenient location, wedged between empires for centuries. It nevertheless today is, a problematic political situation there, which I won't get into too much. Despite that, I'm very proud of how Poland has managed to move on from a very, very chaotic and very traumatic 20th century, which my family very much experienced, and has moved on to being a very prosperous, successful Western country. I will bracket that and note that the current government there, is a problem, but I won't get into that here. My family, the reason I think I have such an intense emotional interest in it is, I had great grandparents who died, in concentration camps, who were in underground resistance, lived through some of the worst years of after the war Stalinism, and fundamentally that historical memory in my family has informed and shaped who I am. And that's why I'm so interested to go, not out of loyalty to Poland. I'm only loyal to one country, and that's America. But it's still part of who I am, and every American, I think, has that sort of history in their family. So that's why I'm so interested in Poland. I know this is a long-winded answer, but moving to some other travels, the other 2 important travels of my life, like I mentioned earlier, were China. I lived in a city called Chongqing, which is where I studied Mandarin for 4 months and then did a lot of traveling throughout China. It was a complete and total culture shock at that point to go in my life that I was not ready for. It was the first time I've lived in a city of that size as a minority. I was, not on the developed coast. I was deep in China's interior. And it was a real struggle to acclimate and to deal with just day-to-day realities that people take for granted here at home. But I left, I think, better equipped to deal with challenges and sort of different culture, different language. I learned Chinese, which was important for me. And I saw a lot of interesting things in China, which has shaped my thinking. The third important travel that I did in my life was to Israel. I traveled to Israel twice, and it was, extraordinarily formative experience because I have an interest in, Jewish history and the history of the Middle East writ large. And those 2 experiences were, my first time in the Middle East. And so I got to know sort of the problems in the region, but also acquainted myself with what I think is a really, really beautiful place at a crossroads. If you know anything about its history, it's such an interesting place to see, millennia of history just scrunched up into a place. Anyway, those are the 3 important places of my life.
You should not complain about being long-winded. You should be a professional storyteller.
Well, thank you.
It seems like you have such, I mean, it doesn't seem, I can tell, even though the first time that we've ever had a conversation was when we started this podcast, but I can tell that you just have a wealth of information and knowledge, and that stems from various parts of your upbringing and your life experiences. And with that, what advice do you have for young people? I want to say in North Dakota, but in general, because it just seems like you just have so much going on. So what advice do you have for a young person?
It's very kind, but I don't know if I have much going on. I think, well, look, so I think specifically for young people in North Dakota, I think North Dakota is a great place to grow up. North Dakota is a safe place. I remember it place, and I developed relationships, friendships with North Dakotans that I will, keep my whole life, no matter where I am. The thing is, though, I think what's valuable for North Dakotan youth is, in your 20s especially, whether it's during college, after college, whenever, I think even if you want to live your whole life in North Dakota, because it's such a wonderful place, especially to have a family, I would say take at least some opportunity to, for a week or for a month or even, whatever amount of time suits you, and works with your life needs and, reality. Go explore a different part of the world, whether it's in the next state or it's in the next other part of the world. I think I knew lots of North Dakotans who were great travelers and who brought back with them to North Dakota just wisdom and knowledge and just a lot that they took with them when they were traveling and brought back and I think made them better people and therefore everyone around them better. I think every North Dakotan youth should strive to see some other part of the world. Another piece of advice is, and again, this depends really on, what you want to do in life and what it is. Everyone wants to do different things, and that's fine. But I've found, at least with my life, that two things. First is that don't be afraid to admit that you've been wrong about something, whether it's an assumption you had or a strongly held conviction. Just because you've believed it your whole life, ask why. And if someone challenges you or pushes you, you might instinctively push back, but over time you might change. And I certainly have changed a lot from when I was, growing up in North Dakota. And I think it's a good thing, to take the values of your childhood, but at the same time, be bold in questioning everything. I think that's really the fount of progress. And the second major thing in my life was that take risk. I went to law school and realized I hated it. Didn't want to be a lawyer, and that's fine because I think your 20s especially is a time when it's great to take risks and to change your path and to try out things you might not otherwise have thought of. It gets harder as you get older because you have obligations, you have deeper roots. Don't forget that you can try out a lot of things. You might decide you don't like them. You might decide you want to do what you were doing earlier, and that's fine. But at least in your 20s, if you try out different things, take risks, I think you might realize that there's worlds of opportunities that you don't even realize are out there. And certainly in Bismarck, as great as it was growing up there are just entire fields and issues and problems that I never, realized were out there until I kind of just took some risks and, tried out different things. So those are the kind of key tidbits I would offer, if anyone cared about my advice.
No, that all sounded great and was very valuable. Those are all very worthy pieces of advice.
Well,
Definitely. I'm so glad that you got to come on this podcast, Adam.
Yes, I
it's been
agree.
great.
Thank you. Yeah. Absolutely. My pleasure. It's great to hear from you, Beth, and to meet you, Rachel.
Yeah.
So I think you answered just about all of our questions, even though it isn't in the order that we sent them to you. But that's better.
It is. It's more organic.
So we'll kind of move down into sort of how we kind of wrap up the podcast. And I know this was in the questions, but I probably didn't explain it to you very well. And I explain it to the audience every time, is that the podcast is based on the fact that in North Dakota, we all know everybody because it's such a small state. So what we like to do is to ask our guests for 3 people that they think would be excellent guests on our podcast who have a connection to North Dakota, whether that's growing up here, going to college here, or working here, spending a good amount of time in North Dakota, who would like to talk about that. So now is the time we'd like to ask you for your 3 recommendations.
Sure. Someone I would like to recommend would be actually there's a great teacher I had who in middle school, and now he's teaching at Century. I'd like to recommend him if I can. Is there, by the way, any kind of like profile that you're looking for or it could be literally anybody?
I think it can be literally anybody. Rach, is that how you feel?
I agree.
Yeah.
It can be anybody.
Yeah. I think we've had a lot of young professionals just because that's our first contacts, but we're open to anything.
Okay, great. There's one of the closest, friends I have in North Dakota who I stay in touch with and who was such a huge part of my life, and I know the life of lots of students, is a guy named Mark Hager, who's a teacher at Century High School now. He's one of the most well-traveled people I know. I spent time with him in Poland. He went to Israel on my recommendation. He's been in Japan. Anyway, he's one of the most interesting people I know in Bismarck. And I think he's very young at heart. He's like runs marathons. He's just one of the most interesting people I know. So I would really encourage you to reach out to Mark. Another guy I'd like to recommend that you talk to is my friend Eric Eggers, because he is, lifelong North Dakotan. His family has deep roots in North Dakota. So one of the most intelligent people I know. He's someone who, when growing up, one of the most important memories I have of him is he built a pipe organ in his dad's shop. How many people do you know in your life just build pipe organs? Okay, you have to be a really off the charts brilliant build a pipe organ. Okay, so talk to him, and I think you will. I think you'll be glad you did. And the third person I'd like to recommend is someone who's very active in the musical life of North Dakota. My friend Josh Johnson, who's a graduate student at North Dakota State University right now. He is a prolific performer of, NDSU is doing, I think, an opera right now. He's prolific performer in, Bismarck with various ensembles. So he's very plugged into the cultural life of Bismarck, which I think people might not necessarily always appreciate. So I would encourage you to reach out to him and talk about what he's doing to help kind of bring North Dakota's cultural life sort of even higher. He's really, really entertaining to talk to us.
Newly engaged, Josh Johnson.
Yes, he is newly engaged. He'll get married.
And shouts out to, I think they're doing the Marriage of Figaro at NDSU.
Correct. Yeah, go see it. I wish I could, but he is very involved, and I think it'd be great to hear just all the cultural goings on of not only Fargo but other communities as well. So
those are great recommendations. Thank you for your recommendations. That's awesome. So then the very last thing we do after recommendations is we talk a little bit about something that we are currently obsessed with. Which is a very loose definition. So we open this up to books, podcasts, music, TV, movies, whatever you want to talk about. or like a whole culture. We've had some very interesting answers the whole way through. So, we'll go first, Adam. So then you can go last, and yours is the one everyone sticks with.
Sure.
Cool. I always do 2 plugs because I always have 2 things I'm obsessed with. But
Go
first,
ahead.
I'm going to say Parks and Recreation. I just finished watching it again for like the 8th or 9th time. It gives you hope about politics and the people in our government in this
New time.
tumultuous time. Yeah, in this weird time. It's weird how accurate it gets on some certain issues. So definitely Parks and Rec, great option to watch. Sorry, 1 second. We had a waitress coming up to us. Okay.
Right, you're in an airport.
I'm in an airport. Yep. And you can hear the luggage on the moving walkway that I'm sitting next to. My second thing that I'm going to recommend is Drunk History, which you can watch all of on Hulu. Drunk History is an absolute joy. It just brings me so much happiness to watch Drunk History. I've learned a lot about different things I didn't know, even though it's drunk people telling me the stories. So, and the creativity behind the whole show, just the way that they crafted the show, the way that they brought this comedy and history together in this perfect place that makes the most sense to our culture now. It's just perfect. It's so interesting to me on an intellectual level as well as it makes me just want to this is going to sound so terrible, but it makes me want to be drunk and tell stories because they're having so much fun. So
Sure.
I would just check out Drunk History. It's a lot of fun and you learn something too. So those are my plugs. Rach?
Those are great. My plug is kind of unusual. I was really racking my brain thinking about what I wanted to plug, but my life this week has pretty much been consumed by work. And I just am on the tail end of a wedding last weekend, which took all of my creative energy for the last 8 months. It wasn't mine, but a very close friend of mine. But my plug is cooking. And Indian food in particular, Indian food is my favorite food. And I grew up really liking it. And when I went to England, curries were something that were always in my face. And so getting to be able to learn how to create these really intricate and beautiful dishes has been really fun for me. I don't have any sources in particular where I'm learning them from. I'm just looking at recipes, Pinterest, stuff like that. And I feel like Indian food is one of those foods where there's something for everybody. There's a lot of misconceptions that it's spicy. I mean, there are very spicy dishes, but there are dishes for everyone. Your 80-year-old grandmother could find a dish that she liked, and so could your, I don't know, whatever friend that likes spicy food, I guess. So that's my plug this week.
Cool.
Last time I had Indian food, Adam, was with you.
That's right. I remember.
Oh, wow.
That's the last time I had Indian food. Mostly because Clay likes to exaggerate how picky I am about eating and will purposely pick diners to make me feel bad when I'm not that.
Well, I would say he's a pretty interesting eater. He's open to a lot of things.
Yeah.
He just likes eating. I mean, we can call him adventurous, but he just really likes to eat.
I'm pointing out that by the way, I just have to put this on the air because it's a crucial fact. I love that at this point in my life, I'm thinner than he is. I lost a lot of weight last year. Body size, proportional.
He's going to hate that you said that.
I'm not saying he's fat. I'm just saying I'm thinner.
You have lost a lot of weight even since I've known you, and he hasn't gained a lot of weight as much as he's just maintained. So
exactly. No, I'm not. It's not a diss. I'm just saying I happen to be thinner than he is.
Oh.
Is it my turn for the favorite?
Yes. It's your turn.
Yep.
All right. Well, okay. So there are 2 things I would say I'm obsessed with. And the first is a book that I just finished reading. And it's written by a friend of mine, actually. I say that kind of, he's a friend. He's called me a friend before. So he's a very well-known author by the name of Robert Kaplan. who I got to know when who I've gotten to know working at this think tank where I've been at, or I was at last year. And this book is called Earning the Rockies, and he just came out with it a few weeks ago. It's basically an argument or narrative about how America's geography fundamentally shaped the kind of great power that it became. And it's an interesting book, as if you're familiar with his other books, he writes these travelogues based on his extensive journeys throughout the world, whether it's the Balkans. He wrote this very famous book called Balkan Ghosts, or his East, or Eastern Europe more broadly. He basically, when he goes places, he immerses himself, and he really understands, I guess, current dynamics of a country on the basis, and links it to its history really beautifully. And with this book, what he did was he traveled through the United States as a young boy, and gained insights about how really you can't understand why America became the country it is in the international sphere, the power that it is, and the way it's shaped the world, without understanding how its geography helped, made it what it is today. So I want to put a plug out for that book, Earning the Rockies. One of the best books you'll read. In terms of obsession, the other obsession I've had, it's a food one. Living in DC, one of the best things about DC is that there's a very large here Ethiopian community, and I have fallen in love with Ethiopian food. I would go constantly to Ethiopian restaurants, and if you are ever in a place where you can try it out, it's for sharing. It's like Indian food, actually, in a lot of respects, Rachel, because I think there were trade routes or whatever between India and Ethiopia long ago, and so there's similarities, I guess you might grasp, but I'm just obsessed with it. So if you're ever in the cities or whatever, it's honestly, can't get enough of it.
Interesting. Yeah, I'll have to try it.
For sure. Anyway, those are my two things.
Awesome. Thank you. Sorry. Oh, my mute is always off. Funny, but okay.
No, that's okay.
Awesome. Thank you for your plugs. So check out all of those things. We haven't done a very good job of linking those in the descriptions, but maybe we'll be better this week. Something to aim for anyway. And with that, I think my plane has started boarding. So I think we're going to have to wrap it up here.
You got to get back home.
I got to get back home and get out of this airport where I've just been drinking champagne and eating chocolate tarts. So it hasn't been that bad.
Not a bad night.
Not at all. We want to say an extra special thank you to Adam. You live a busy life. We're really thankful that you were able to spend this time with us. We love talking to you and to hear your perspective.
Likewise.
Clay was so sad that he couldn't sit in on this. Which is why I conveniently scheduled it for when I'm in the Minneapolis airport. Because you guys are not easy on each other, that's for sure.
That's what this would have devolved in ways that would not have been good for your podcast.
It wouldn't.
Actually.
It wouldn't have all. So for all you listeners, thanks for tuning in. You can find us on SoundCloud and iTunes if you search for Small State Podcast. We're the one with the buffalo. You can find us on Instagram at Small State Podcast, or Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and it's Small State Podcast or Small State ND. Right, Rach?
Yes, correct.
Okay. She set them all up. I just asked her to post things on them. So, yeah, I think that's it. Thanks again, Adam. And thank everybody.
Rachel, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks for everybody who's downloaded, and give us a like, subscribe, comment, review. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night. Or morning, whenever you're listening to it. Bye. Okay, cool. So that's where I'll cut it. Thank you so much, Adam.
Yeah, this was great.
This is awesome.
This has been awesome.
I need to do a podcast. This is fun.
I was just going to say that. You need to do a podcast. Like, I was so enamored. Like, oh my goodness.
No, it's not that. It's just I like the idea of just talking and not necessarily. I mean, writing is one thing, but it's kind of exhausting.
talking is so much easier, and podcasting makes it easy for everyone to just talk about whatever they want. So
Exactly.
No, writing is exhausting, and to do well, at least with this, you can just sort of make it somewhat more natural. I like it.
yeah. So okay, well, I do have to go. My plane has started boarding.
Yeah, go. Okay, we'll talk to you, Beth. Bye. Nice
Yeah.
to meet you.
Bye.
Bye. I'm gonna end this. See you later.
Bye.